Cavewoman discovers selfies. Unga woke up with the sun shining directly on her face, entering through the irregular opening of the cave she shared with 17 other people from the tribe. She stretched, making a noise that startled 2 bats on the ceiling, and got up with the feeling that the day would be different. She couldn't explain why. Maybe it was feminine intuition, maybe it was just gas from the undercooked mammoth meat from the night before. He emerged from the cave, adjusting the animal skin he wore as clothing, and gazed at the intense blue sky. It was a beautiful day, the kind that would even make Grok, the tribe's grumpiest hunter, crack a smile. Unga was 23, which in the Paleolithic era meant she was already in her late middle age, and she felt she hadn't yet accomplished anything truly important in life. Of course, she had invented a better way to sharpen spears using 2 specific stones, and she had been the first to suggest that perhaps throwing water on the fire would extinguish it instead of just screaming desperately until it went out on its own. But none of that seemed enough. Something was missing. That's when she saw it. There, near the stream where the tribe fetched water, something strange was glistening among the stones. Unga approached cautiously, as she had learned from her father before he was eaten by a saber-toothed tiger. The object was rectangular, smooth, black as night, but with one side that reflected like the surface of a lake on a calm day. She had never seen anything like it. He picked up the object carefully, turning it from side to side. It weighed less than it looked and had some strange symbols on the back that she couldn't decipher, obviously, since writing hadn't been invented yet. Upon touching the smooth surface, something magical happened. The object lit up, emitting a bluish light that made Unga scream and almost throw it away. But curiosity, the same curiosity that had made her ancestors leave the trees to explore the savannas, held her hand back. The smartphone screen, because that's what she had found, displayed an image. Unga stared, fascinated, at that magical window that displayed vibrant colors and shapes that moved when she touched it. Her hands, dirty with soil, began to glide across the screen, opening apps randomly. She passed by the calendar, not understanding the numbers, the weather app, which tried in vain to find a location via satellite, and finally reached the camera. When the front camera activated, Unga saw her own face reflected on the screen and almost dropped the device again. It was like looking at the water of the lake, but better, clearer, more real. She could see every detail, the dirt on her face, the tangled hair that hadn't seen a comb for thousands of years before combs were invented, the wide brown eyes of surprise. She turned her face from side to side, marveling. She grimaced. She smiled, showing her teeth, some of which were missing due to a fight over food last week. It was love at first sight. Unga didn't know what it was, but she knew she needed more. She touched the white circular button on the screen, not quite knowing what to expect. A digital click sounded, and suddenly her image froze on the screen. She had just taken her first selfie, some 12,000 years before Instagram was invented. He stared at the image, his mouth agape. It was her, but still, captured at that exact moment. It was like magic, but better than any magic the tribe's shaman had ever tried. And far more useful than that time he said he could make it rain but only managed to spit upwards. For the next few minutes, Unga took pictures of everything. Her foot. A rock. Another rock that looked exactly like the first, but which she was sure was different. A lizard sunbathing. Her finger. She switched back to the front camera and started experimenting with angles. She quickly discovered that holding the device above her head and looking slightly upwards made her face look better. She was unknowingly inventing the perfect selfie angle. But Unga was a generous woman, the kind who would share the last strip of dried meat even when she was hungry. She couldn't keep that discovery to herself. She ran back to the cave, shouting in proto-language something that would vaguely translate to, "Guys, come see this, it's incredible, seriously. Drop everything you're doing." The tribe gathered around her with that mixture of curiosity and distrust that has always characterized humans. There was Grok, the grumpy hunter. Mala, the best fruit gatherer in the whole region. Urg, who wasn't very good at anything but was nice. Thak, the rebellious teenager who was always arguing with the elders about the best way to hunt. And 12 other members whose names history would not preserve. Unga showed the smartphone to everyone, and the reaction was immediate. Some recoiled in fear, thinking it was some kind of witchcraft. Others approached, fascinated. When she activated the front camera and they saw their own faces on the screen, chaos ensued. Grok shouted something about demons. Mala tried to grab the device with both hands. Urg simply fainted. But Thak, the young man, understood immediately. His eyes shone with that spark of recognition that transcends generations. He took the smartphone from Unga's hands, turned the camera towards himself, and instinctively did something that would be replicated billions of times in the future. He took a selfie making a duck face. And that's when everything changed. Within hours, the entire tribe was obsessed with their smartphones. They had discovered they could take as many photos as they wanted, and everyone wanted their turn. Mala took a selfie holding her best bunch of berries. Grok, after overcoming his initial fear, took several photos flexing his muscles and holding his favorite spear. Even Urg, after waking up from fainting, took a selfie lying on the ground that accidentally became artistic thanks to the natural lighting. Unga watched everything with a mixture of pride and growing concern. She had created something, or rather, discovered something that was completely changing the social dynamics of the tribe. People were no longer going out to hunt or gather. They were too busy taking pictures. Thak, in particular, had developed a worrying obsession. He had discovered how to make different faces and was documenting each one. Tongue sticking out. Wide eyes. Angry face. Thoughtful face. Face like he just ate something bad. He had an expression for every occasion, and they all needed to be photographed. On the third day after the discovery, the situation had become critical. No one had hunted anything. Food supplies were running out. But everyone was happy because they had hundreds of selfies stored on their smartphones. Unga had begun to develop what would later be diagnosed as carpal tunnel syndrome from holding the device at an awkward angle for so long. That's when Grok had a brilliant idea. If they could capture their own images in that magic box, why not capture an image of the hunt as well? Imagine being able to show everyone the giant mammoth you killed without having to drag the dead mammoth back to the cave. It was revolutionary. Thus began the era of trophy photos. Grok went hunting with his smartphone hanging from a cord made of tendons. When he finally brought down a wild boar after hours of pursuit, his first reaction wasn't to thank the spirits or begin dismembering the animal for transport. It was to take a selfie next to the dead boar, from his best angle, capturing the bloodied spear to show that he was the one who had done it. The photo turned out amazing. At least he thought so. He showed it to the whole tribe when he got back, and they all agreed it was a great photo, although they were more interested in eating the wild boar than in appreciating the composition of the image. Mala didn't want to be left behind. She started taking artistic photos of her collections. Fruits arranged in beautiful patterns on smooth stones. Edible roots organized by size and color. Once she spent 3 hours trying to photograph a butterfly perched on a flower, which in the future would be called macro photography, but which at that moment was called Mala is acting strange again. The tribe had split into factions. There were those who preferred natural, unposed selfies, capturing the authentic moment. There were those who spent hours preparing the perfect scene, arranging rocks and branches as a backdrop. And then there was Urg, who unintentionally discovered the camera's timer and spent an entire day running around trying to get into the frame before the photo was taken, creating a series of increasingly desperate images of him trying to arrive in time. Unga watched all this with mixed feelings. On the one hand, she was proud to have introduced something so impactful to her community. On the other, she felt that perhaps things had gone too far when she saw two women from the tribe arguing over who had the best profile on the front camera. One night, sitting alone at the cave entrance under a starry sky unpolluted by any artificial light, Unga reflected on what had happened. The smartphone in her hand still had 47% battery, according to an indicator she couldn't interpret. She scrolled through the hundreds of stored photos, reliving the last few days through those images frozen in time. There were funny photos. Beautiful photos. Photos that made absolutely no sense, like the one where URG had accidentally photographed his own foot. But they all told a story. The story of people discovering a new way of seeing themselves, of expressing themselves, of leaving a mark of the fact that they existed. She thought about the paintings they sometimes made on the cave walls. Hands stamped with red paint, figures of animals, hunting scenes. That, too, was a way of saying, I was here. Selfies weren't so different. They were just a quicker and more precise way of doing the same thing humans have always done: document their existence, share their perspective, connect with others. But Unga was wise beyond her years. She realized there was a necessary balance. Selfies were wonderful, but they couldn't replace real life. They couldn't replace hunting, gathering, the survival work that kept the tribe alive. You had to live life to have something worth photographing. The next morning, Unga called a tribal meeting. He stood on a large rock, holding his smartphone above his head like a sacred talisman, and gave a speech. Well, it wasn't exactly a speech in the modern sense. It was more grunts and expressive gestures, but the message was clear: they needed rules. Rule number 1, only take photos after completing the day's tasks. No selfies before hunting or gathering food. Rule number 2, share the device fairly. Everyone would have their time. Rule number 3, don't fight over photos. Rule number 4, proposed by Grok, never take a picture of someone who has just woken up without permission, because apparently he was very sensitive about his sleepy-faced morning photos. The tribe agreed. Well, not without some resistance from Thak, who argued passionately that creativity couldn't be limited by schedules, but eventually relented when Unga promised he could have extra photo sessions on weekends. Or the Paleolithic equivalent of weekends, which was basically days when no predators are trying to eat us. The following weeks were a time of adjustment. The tribe learned to balance their obsession with selfies with the practical needs of survival. They developed a system: in the morning, work. In the afternoon, after food was secured and safety assured, it was time for photos. And what photos they were! Mala developed a true artistic talent. Her still life compositions with forest elements were surprisingly sophisticated. She once created an arrangement of different types of leaves in a color gradient that would make any modern interior design influencer weep with envy. Grok discovered he had a knack for action photography. He managed to capture URG mid-jump over the creek, freezing the exact moment he was suspended in the air, droplets of water glistening in the sun around him. It was accidental. He was trying to photograph a fish, but the result was spectacular. Thak specialized in group selfies. He discovered he could press the button and then run into the frame with the others. The photos always showed him running in the blurry background while everyone else posed normally, but to him, that was avant-garde art. And Unga became the official curator. She was the one who decided which photos were worth keeping and which could be deleted to save space. It was immense power, and she wielded it wisely and fairly. Although she secretly deleted all the photos in which she herself didn't look good, but that was understandable. One day, something unexpected happened. A neighboring tribe, who lived on the other side of the mountain, appeared for a trading visit. They brought rare animal skins to exchange for good quality flint. Their leader, a large man named Kronk, was immediately intrigued when he saw Unga holding the smartphone. At first, there was tension. Trade between tribes was always a delicate matter, each side suspecting the other would try to deceive them. But when Unga showed Kronk his smartphone and took a selfie with him, something magical happened. He smiled. A genuine smile, not the political smile he had been using in the negotiation. Through their smartphones, the two groups found common ground. They took photos together. They laughed at the funny faces they were making. Kronk was particularly fascinated by his own image, spending several minutes turning his head from side to side, admiring his profile. The trade negotiation was the most successful either tribe had ever experienced. And in the end, Kronk made a proposal: why not take a big group photo, everyone together, to celebrate? It would be a symbol of friendship between the tribes. It took 15 minutes to get everyone together. Someone always had their eyes closed, or had moved at just the right moment, or simply wasn't paying attention. But eventually, after several attempts, they succeeded. The first intertribal photo in history. 34 people crammed into the frame, some striking serious poses, others smiling, some making faces, and inevitably, looking to the side at the exact moment the photo was taken. It was perfect in its imperfection. When Kronk's tribe left, they promised to return. And when they did, they would bring something special, copper ore that shone like the sun, which might be used to make more of those magic boxes. They didn't know they were talking about metallurgy thousands of years before it was invented, but the intention was good. That night, Unga stared at the group photo for a long time. There was something there that transcended words, words that didn't even need to have been invented yet to be transcended. It was proof that they existed. That they had connected with others. That, for a moment, tribes that might have been enemies had united around something simple and universal, the desire to capture a moment, to say, I was here, this happened, this mattered. The smartphone, of course, would eventually run out of battery. There was no way to recharge it in the Paleolithic era. Unga knew this, although she didn't understand exactly why the device was slowing down, why the light was dimming. She just knew, instinctively, that it wouldn't last forever. So she did something smart. She started limiting usage even further. Instead of hundreds of photos a day, just a few. Only the moments that truly mattered. The birth of Mala's baby. Thak's first successful hunt as an adult. The full moon perfectly reflected in the lake. Grok finally smiling genuinely after years of a frown. Each photo became precious because it was finite. And in a way, that made them more valuable than if they could take infinite photos forever. Weeks turned into months. The smartphone got slower and slower. The screen started malfunctioning in some places. But the photos remained, stored in the device's memory like treasures in a secret cave. Unga grew old. At 26, she was considered an elder by the tribe. Her hands were no longer as steady, her eyesight was no longer as good. But she still held that smartphone like the treasure it was, showing it to the children of the tribe, telling the story of when she discovered the magic of capturing moments. One autumn afternoon, as the leaves began to change color and the air grew cooler, Unga sat on his favorite rock overlooking the valley. He held his smartphone in his hands, looking at the last photo he had taken. The entire tribe gathered together, including 3 new children who had been born since the discovery of the device. All smiling, all together. She pressed the button to turn on the screen, but nothing happened. She tried again. Nothing. The battery had finally died. The smartphone, that magical window to self-awareness and documentation, had become just a piece of inert glass and metal. Unga expected to feel sadness, but she didn't. Instead, she felt gratitude. That object had taught her tribe something valuable. It had taught them that they were worthy of being seen, of being remembered. That their lives, even though simple by standards they couldn't even imagine, had beauty and meaning. But more importantly, the battery dying taught another lesson, that life happens in the moments between photos. That the hunt, the gathering, the conversations around the fire, the starry sky, the smell of rain coming, the touch of a helping hand, all of this was real in a way that a photo could never fully capture. That night, around the campfire, Unga told the story of how he found the smartphone for the 100th time. But this time, he added an ending. He spoke about how the best things don't last forever, and how that makes them even more special. He spoke about how they had learned to see each other in a new way, and how that learning would remain even without the magic device. Thak, now a respected young adult, suggested they do something to honor the memory of the smartphone. They took paints that Mala had made from minerals and berries, and together they created a painting on the cave wall. It wasn't a painting of hunting or hands. It was something new, inspired by selfies, portraits of each tribe member, drawn with all the care they could muster. They weren't as precise as digital photos. The proportions were off, the details were simple. But there was something about them that photos never had. They were handmade, with love, each line intentionally drawn. They were imperfect in a human and beautiful way. Unga watched for hours. There was Grok, depicted with his spear and his perpetually furrowed brow. There was Mala with her basket of fruit. Thak making a face. URG, well, URG had been drawn from the side because the artist wasn't quite sure how to draw a face from the front, but the intention was there. And there she was, Unga, drawn in the center. The woman who brought selfies to the Paleolithic era. The first content curator in history. The original cave influencer. In the years that followed, the story of the magic smartphone became legend. It was told and retold, each time gaining new details, some true, others embellished. Some versions said the device had been a gift from the gods. Others said Unga had conjured it through sheer willpower. But the simple and beautiful truth was that a curious woman had found something extraordinary and had used it to help her tribe see themselves with new eyes. And in the process, she had planted a seed that, thousands of years later, would blossom into billions of selfies taken every day around the world. Each one of them echoing that first moment of discovery for Unga. Each one of them saying the same thing, I am here. I exist. I matter. Look at me. And perhaps, just perhaps, somewhere in space-time, in that quantum tangle of possibilities that connects all moments that have ever existed and will ever exist, Unga knew that her discovery had not been forgotten. That every person making a face for the front camera is a spiritual descendant of that first selfie taken on the banks of a prehistoric stream. The smartphone itself, buried by Unga in a special ceremony beneath a sacred tree, would wait patiently. It would wait through ice ages and warm periods, through the rise and fall of civilizations, through the development of agriculture, writing, the wheel, and the internet. And perhaps, in the distant future, archaeologists would find it. They would try to understand how a modern smartphone ended up in strata dating back 12,000 years. They would create theories about time travel, about ancient visitors, about temporal anomalies. But the truth would be much simpler and stranger. A cavewoman found a phone and discovered selfies. And for a brief, brilliant moment in human history, before the battery died, a Paleolithic tribe experienced the same kind of digital self-reflection that would define humanity millennia later. Unga lived to be 31, an impressive age for her time. In her final days, surrounded by her loving tribe, she smiled, thinking of all the photos they had taken, all the memories they had captured. And although the digital images had been lost with the death of the smartphone, the memories remained. Transmitted through stories, through paintings, through the knowledge that they were worthy of being seen. And with her last breath, Unga did something she would do millions of times throughout the future history of humanity. She smiled with that specific smile you make when you're taking a selfie. A smile that says, I am present, I am aware of this moment, and I choose to remember it with joy. There was no camera to capture it. But perhaps that was the point. The best selfies, Unga had discovered, are the ones we carry within ourselves. The ones that don't need a screen or a battery. The ones that live in the way we see ourselves, in the way we allow others to see us, in the courage to exist fully and say yes, here I am, in all my human imperfection and glory. And so ends the story of the cave woman who discovered selfies. A story that is both absurd and profound, impossible and inevitable. Because in the end, selfies aren't about technology. They're about something much older and much more fundamental, the human desire to be seen, to be remembered, to leave a mark that says, I was here, and my existence had meaning. Unge understood this. And perhaps, just perhaps, when you take your next selfie, you can think of her. The first of us all. The Paleolithic pioneer of digital self-awareness. And perhaps, in her honor, you will take that selfie with a little more intention, a little more joy, a little more awareness of the extraordinary moment of being alive and being able to capture that fact to share with others. Because in the end, that's what selfies have always been. From that first blurry photo of Unge to the last selfie that will be taken at the end of human civilization. They are small acts of courage. They are declarations of existence. They are ways of saying to the vast and indifferent universe, hey, I'm here. I matter. Remember me. And the universe, through each person who sees these photos, responds, yes, I see you. You are seen. You are remembered. You matter. May we all have Unge's courage. The curiosity to explore new things. The wisdom to balance innovation with tradition. And, above all, the joy of simply existing and celebrating that existence, whether with a 12,000-year-old smartphone in the future, with paintings on cave walls, or simply with a genuine smile that says, I am alive, and that is enough.